The metal world might have needed a hero, but at the turn of the millennium, they didn't find it in Metallica. The band were out to become heroes of their own story, going toe-to-toe with then file-sharing giant Napster. On July 11, 2000, Metallica drummer Lars Ulrich read his testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee, accusing Napster of copyright infringement. He had discovered that a demo of I Disappear, a song that the band had penned for the Mission Impossible 2 soundtrack, was being played on the radio before it had even been released. Metallica traced the leak to a file on Napster's peer-to-peer file-sharing network, where it turned out that the band's entire catalog was available for free download. Metallica sought a minimum of $10 million in damages, at a rate of $100,000 per illegally downloaded song. Metallica were provided with a list of 335,435 Napster users who were allegedly sharing the band's songs online in violation of copyright laws. This 60,000-page list was delivered to Napster's office. Metallica demanded that their songs be removed from file sharing and that the users responsible for sharing their music be banned from the service. 300,000 users were banned from the platform, although that didn't mean much because they could just sign up again with new credentials. The ultimate outcome of this case was that Napster was eventually required to file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy and liquidate its assets. But the move would be met by backlash from fans. Mark Erickson was the president and CEO of August Nelson, an online music company, and it ran a parody website called paylars.com, a sarcastic site that allowed fans to donate just $1 for each officially released Metallica song that they had downloaded, to make up for all the revenue the band thinks it's losing to online MP3 training, it wrote. Erickson actually said that a lot of people are like, why should I feel guilty for downloading MP3s? I've seen all their concerts, I own all the CDs, I've bought the t-shirts, they've got my money already. Further to this, an animated short called Napster Bad became available at campchaos.com.
Good afternoon, my name is, Lars Ulrich from Metallica. I worked for years to get where I am today. Years and years of playing clubs and recording demo tapes. Me and my buddy, James Hetfield here, have shed blood, sweat, and motherfucking beer to get where we are today.
Beer! Good!
And now we're fucking wealthy beyond, belief. I mean, the other day was, obvious to me how much money we have, because our bassist, motherfucking Jason Newsted bought his very first gold-plated Ferrari, and the fucking thing came with, a crew of naked Filipino sex slaves and this Mexican houseboy, all free, just because he's from Metallica, That's fucking rich, man. So where was I? Oh yeah, all you post-pubescent boys who have bought, our albums and our t-shirts and our concert videos and
T-shirts, good!
Yeah, t-shirts. You loyal fans who, bang your heads at our concerts and pay, $200 for a ticket, $20 for, a CD, $50 for a Metallica t-shirt, and, $100 for a genuine Metallica cock ring. You're all fucking awesome, and we'll never forget you. You fucking made us rich. You fucking made us popular. You got us under the cover of, Kerrang! Magazine. I worship you. You, the Metallica fan.
Beer! Good!
Unless you download it until it sleeps from Napster. Then you're going to motherfucking jail. You're motherfucking meat. You'll be some fat, greasy, tattooed bastard's buttery cornhole. Who do you think you are? I mean, just, because you, made us rich, you think you can get free stuff? Songs that we spent upwards of, 24 to 48 hours writing and recording? I mean, James blew up for you. He ignited into a fiery inferno for you people.
Fire bad! Fire bad!
Needless to say, the animation didn't paint Metallica in the most favorable of lights. Even Metallica's hard rock peers, Motley Crue, who helped them all those years ago, entered the fray. The Crue, who once tangled with fellow Los Angeles rockers Guns N' Roses, recruited Camp Chaos to produce their own animated jab, and it was called Metalligreed.
Hey, this is Nikki Sixx from Motley Crue.
And this here is Vince Neil.
Perhaps you guys have read about the controversies surrounding Napster and MP3 music on the internet. As far as we're concerned, it's all fucking bullshit. You know, we've been in the music business long enough to know why bands like Metallica have taken such extreme measures to kill Napster and humiliate their fans. You know why? 2 words. Summer Tour.
What a group of cranky, moody assholes.
The case would go on to be a landmark, and despite Napster's eventual shutting down, digital downloads would come to characterize how music would go on to be accessed in the 21st century, first through platforms such as iTunes and later Spotify, as well as numerous illegal file-sharing platforms that still permeate the online landscape to this very day in 2020. And while Metallica made their case in the courts, Megadeth brought in the new millennium by returning to their roots, or at least trying to, with 2001's release, The World Needs a Hero, which featured Al Pitrelli on guitar and Jimmy DeGrasso on drums in place of Marty Friedman and Nick Menza. The album received mixed reviews, and Rolling Stone described it as sluggish, retrograde, and a step back for the band. Whatever the case, Megadeth had signaled its intent to go back to the band's roots, and in hindsight, almost 20 years later, it will turn out to be a step in the right direction. Metallica's subsequent release would come 2 years later, a good 6 years since its predecessor, Reload, and according to most fans of the band, hardly worth the wait. Saint Anger was derided for its lackluster songwriting, muddled production, and drum sound that was likened to a garbage can. The media site Pitchfork gave the album 0.8 out of 10, and it's hard to blame them when you account for the lyrical brilliance of frantic tick 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 tock. Yes. And the album would feature a notable absence, that of bass player Jason Newsted. Newsted had grown frustrated with his status as a marginalized sideman, even 14 years into his time with the band, and he wanted more creative control. Hetfield wasn't having any of it. It was one thing for Newsted not to be able to assert more control within Metallica, but Hetfield wouldn't even let Newsted pursue a side project called Echo Brain. Ulrich would later say that Hetfield had control issues. Jason was caught in no man's land, so in a way he sacrificed himself, or he had to be sacrificed in order for us to be able to move to the place we're at now. So it's ironic and really sad. For me, it's amazing that it lasted for 14 years, that Jason stuck it out for that long. Ulrich would also add that James Hetfield has his vision of the perfect family, and it's almost kind of mafia style. You're part of the family, and if you step outside of the family, you're betraying the family, and you'll get ostracized. And that's essentially at the heart of a lot of the stuff that Metallica tried to work through in the early 2000s. Newsted would be replaced by suicidal tendencies bassist Robert Trujillo. And as for all that stuff that the band was trying to work through, well, it would become chronicled in a documentary film, which took its name from a song on Saint Anger, Some Kind of Monster. As the documentary synopsis put it, in April 2001, heavy metal band Metallica is at a crossroads. Their lawsuit against file-sharing service Napster has caused a fan backlash. Longtime bassist Jason Newsted has quit the group, and relations between the band members are at an all-time low. They're working with performance enhancement coach Phil Towle to deal with their growing tensions. Lars Ulrich reflected on the production, saying, "We were at a crossroads. We'd been really good at being able to compartmentalize a lot of this stuff, suppress it with drinking or other extravagances. This was the first time we'd been able to talk with each other, get to know each other and work stuff out, you know. The cameras were there catching all of it." It portrayed the band in an immensely vulnerable light, and many commended the band for having the guts to release such a revelatory film. Notably, the film featured an exchange between Dave Mustaine and Lars Ulrich.
It's difficult for me to comprehend that the only thing that you feel when you look back on the last 20 years is rooted in the Metallica thing.
Okay. I'll explain in as simple terms as I can, not to stultify you, but to just make it real easy. I had nothing, then I had everything, then I had nothing again. And it was okay going from nothing to everything to nothing, but then having someone stand on the back of my head and keep me underwater made it even harder for me. I've been erased from any involvement. The quotes that I was never meant to be in here anyways, I was just filling a spot, I was just a temporary guy, I was a fucking loser and a drunk, I got kicked out. All the horrible things that were said immediately after my firing. I agree, I should have been fired because I was dangerous because of my disease. But watching for so many years the band continue to become successful and successful and successful, and us to never address, the way that I was let go. My God, Lars, you guys woke me up and said, you know what, you're out. And I asked you, what, no warning? I said, no second chance? And you guys said, no, go.
Interestingly, producers requested Dave Mustaine's approval to include footage of his 2001 meeting with Ulrich. Although Mustaine denied the request, he had earlier signed a release form, giving the band and the producers the right to use the footage. Mustaine later claimed that this marked the final betrayal. Although he received a measure of satisfaction at being included and acknowledged in the film as Metallica's original guitarist, Mustaine felt that his interview footage was edited to portray him in a less than flattering manner. Responding to Mustaine's criticism, Ulrich said, "So put these 3 facts down." Lars Ulrich responded to Mustaine's criticism. "So put these 3 facts down. He was in our band for a year. He never played on a Metallica record, and it was 22 years ago. It's pretty absurd that it can still be that big a deal." Mustaine's sentiments about his former band did indeed come to consume him for most of his career, as he was famously quoted in saying, "It wasn't enough for Megadeth to do well. I wanted Metallica to fail." So poignant was his resentment towards Metallica that it has come to be used as a case study by several high-profile authors on the folly of ego and how comparison can indeed be the thief of joy. Notably, Mustaine's inability to be grateful and happy with establishing one of the most ferocious, commercially and critically successful metal bands of all time, a band that would go on to sell almost 40 million albums, including 7 top 10 appearances, was profiled by New York Times bestselling authors Ryan Holiday in his book Ego is the Enemy and Mark Manson in his book The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Whatever character flaws Mustaine might harbor to this very day, after all, he is human. He has used his pain as fuel to his fire. Over the next 2 decades, Megadeth would return to form, releasing 6 studio albums between 2004 and 2016, 3 of which, Endgame, 13, and 2016's Dystopia, would be critically acclaimed, the latter entering the Billboard 200 at number 3, and earning the band its 12th trip to the Grammy Awards.
For Best Metal Performance, the nominees are Baroness, Gojira, Korn, Megadeth, Periphery.
And the Grammy goes to Dystopia, Megadeth. Yes!
Wow. Fantastic. Only took 12 tries to get this. Last time we were here, we were talking to Kenny G, and he asked me how many times we were here, and he goes, well, 11 isn't that bad. And I said, how many times did it take you? And he said 21. And I was like, oh my God, if it takes 21 times, I don't know that I'll live that long.
Of course, the house band at the Grammys, playing Metallica's Master of Puppets as Megadeth made their way to the stage, was an ill-advised move. The Grammy Award fulfilled one of two items on Mustaine's bucket list. The only remaining item on Mustaine's bucket list was induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, something Metallica achieved in 2009. And despite Newsted being invited to the ceremony, Mustaine was excluded, even though he had writing credits on Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning. He would later say that it wasn't the Rock Hall that didn't want him there, but Metallica. And the Rock Hall could do much worse than induct Megadeth into the Hall of Fame, especially when you consider the enduring quality of their albums, prompting Louder Sound to rank 2009's Endgame at number 2, Dystopia at number 6, and 13 at number 8 in its ranking of the best Megadeth albums of all time. Nowadays, when you go to a Megadeth show, you can expect to hear a healthy mix of post-2000 songs as well as staples from the 80s and 90s. Metallica, on the other hand, have gone from apparent misstep to misstep on the studio album front since 2003's Saint Anger. There were definitely some bright spots on 2008's Death Magnetic and 2016's Hardwired to Self-Destruct, but Master of Puppets, they were not, despite the band's best intentions to get back to that energy and sound. 2011's collaboration with Lou Reed, Lulu, was widely derided by fans and critics alike. NME called it one of the worst reviewed albums ever, although it must be said that David Bowie liked it, and perhaps that's the point. It was representative of a band looking to take risks and stretch the boundaries. Whether or not they actually achieved that, or it was all in vain, this humble narrator will leave up to you to decide. All of Metallica's post-year 2000 albums, though, would debut at number 1, pretty much all over the world, now testament to the household name that the band demands, perhaps more so than the quality of the music they're putting out. And that's a vital distinction that many metalheads and fans of both bands draw today. Metallica is no doubt bigger and far more commercially successful than Megadeth ever was, and perhaps ever will be at this point, having sold 125 million albums globally, more than 3 times that of Megadeth. Metallica's won 9 Grammy Awards to Megadeth's 1, and grossed an astonishing $1.4 billion from touring alone over their 40-year career. And while it's not an exact science, celebrity net worth pins Dave Mustaine's net worth at a very admirable and comfortable $18 million. But it pales in comparison to Lars Ulrich's $350 million. But again, comparison is the thief of joy. And when it comes to success in business and in life, a lot of it comes down to how you choose to measure success and who is doing the measuring. When it comes to the heavy metal genre and the critical reception of the band's albums amongst the genre's hardcore following, it's hard to make a claim that Metallica's post-Black Album material can hold a candle to Megadeth's. Unlike Metallica, and despite the Risk album, Megadeth have largely avoided the sellout tag for most of their career. While Metallica no doubt won what is arguably the most important and influential decade in heavy metal's history to date, the 80s, Megadeth went on to release 7 critically acclaimed albums over the subsequent 3 decades, with Countdown, Euthanasia, Cryptic Writings, United Abominations, Endgame, 13, and Dystopia all in the reckoning for greatest Megadeth albums of all time, and all featuring in the top metal release lists put out by various publications in those respective years. And all of these albums are true to the heavy metal genre fans know and love. But of course, it's not all about quantity, but also quality, and also enduring influence. And the influence of Metallica's first 5 albums on the genre as a whole and on music as a whole can never be understated, and perhaps it will never be matched. And so, as members of both bands shared the stage for the Big 4 shows in 2010 and 11, it represented a symbolic burying of the hatchet between Mustaine and Metallica. The Big 4 played their last concert on September 14, 2011 in New York City's Yankee Stadium. 7 years later though, in 2018, when asked about the possibility of another Big Four show, Mustaine said this: "Oh, I don't know about that. That has nothing to do with the Big Four. I think Lars is just afraid to play with Megadeth." It seems the more things change, the more they stay the same. But something that may serve to shift Mustaine's perspective might be the throat cancer diagnosis he received in May of 2019. Since then, Mustaine, now in his late 50s, endured 51 radiation treatments and 9 chemotherapy treatments, determined to play music again. And he has spoken openly about how important prayer has been to him during this time, having become a born-again Christian in 2002. Fortunately, for death heads everywhere, halfway through Megadeth's appearance in London in January of 2020, he shared some good news with the crowd.
On October 16th, I went to go see the doctor and he said, "You're 100% free of cancer."
Mustaine had survived an alcoholic father, being booted from Metallica, a heroin addiction, grunge and nu metal, and so it's hardly surprising to see him beat cancer. At the same time, Metallica were also going through their own offstage difficulties, with Hetfield's ongoing addiction to alcohol forcing the band to cancel its 2019 tour of Australia and New Zealand, as the frontman went back into rehab. Whatever comes, both bands have cemented their names as heavy metal legends and have gone on to influence millions of people around the world. They paved the way for today's metal heroes. Bands such as Viking death metalers Amon Amarth and Trivium regularly grace the Billboard Top 40, while heavy as they come Virginian metalers Lamb of God have made 4 visits to the Billboard Top 10, and the Metallica-inspired Avenged Sevenfold have soared to the very top of the charts, hitting number 1 on the Billboard 200 not once but twice in recent years. These bands are instrumental in heavy metal now becoming one of the fastest growing genres in the world. Actually, no, the fastest growing genre in the world, according to a study performed by TuneCore. And this is despite the fact that heavy metal traces its origins back to the likes of Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin in the very early 1970s. And in 2015, Spotify crunched its streaming numbers and also found that heavy metal fans were the most loyal of all by a significant margin. It is this loyalty that sees bands continuing to sell out arenas and in some cases stadiums, despite little to no radio or TV play or mainstream media exposure whatsoever. Something that has characterized metal since its inception, and something that is endearing to the genre's most hardcore fans. Today, somewhere, someone is sitting at their laptop, about to write an advertisement. But it's not going to end up in a newspaper. It's going to make the rounds on social media. And as they start typing, the following words appear on their monitor. Musicians wanted. Influencers include Megadeth and Metallica. Thus concludes our series on Megadeth versus Metallica. If you enjoyed it, I'd love it if you shared this with a friend of yours who you think might enjoy it as well. In the meantime, perhaps give us a rating wherever you listen to your podcasts, and if you want to follow our series going forward, make sure you're subscribed, as we'll be covering all sorts of feuds between bands across the last few decades. In fact, if you've got some ideas on battles that you'd like us to cover, please hit us up on Instagram at the No Filter Network, or hit me up on Twitter at Steve Glaveski. That's Glaveski. Of course, this podcast would not have been possible without the amazing books by the likes of Paul Brannigan and Ian Winwood, who co-wrote Birth, School, Metallica, Death, Enter Night by Mick Wall, as well as Hello Me, Meet the Real Me, A Life in Metal by Dave Mustaine. You can find all sources that contributed to the writing of this show over at nofilter.media/battle. Until next time, cue those house lights.